Welcome to the Trend Detection Podcast, powered by Siemens. And now your host, Niall Sullivan.
Hello and welcome to Trend Detection. Today we're with James Loach to talk about the topic of Gen AI, a feature which will soon be available on the Senseye Predictive Maintenance app. So, hi James, how are you?
Yeah, I'm pretty well. You, Emily?
Oh, great, thank you. So, thank you so much for joining us today. It's really appreciated. So, to start off, are you able to introduce yourself and your role at Siemens?
Yeah, sure. So my name is James Loach, and I'm head of research at Senseye Predictive Maintenance. Okay, so in charge of developing the algorithms and conceptual structures and things that sit around the algorithms, which I guess we'll talk about in a little bit. My background before Senseye and Siemens was in academia. As an experimental particle physicist for many years in Europe, North America, and in China. And yeah, during that time, I was doing a mixture of data analysis and modeling and hardware development for neutrino and dark matter experiments. Okay, but yeah, I've been working in this role now for about 6 years. Yeah.
Oh, great. That's really interesting to hear about your background and what's been involved in that. So, as someone, with an academic background, it'd be really interesting to hear about, what interested you most about working for a software company and what were those kind of, the key aspects about that made you think, right, this is the avenue that I would like to go down.
Yeah, I mean, I can sort of say why it's interesting, particularly in comparison to academia, which I think is just it's a little bit broader, right? Okay, I mean, you have a user that you're dealing with, or users. You have a user interface and the design, all those kind of interactions, right? And then obviously, the business side of things and what have you. And you have all of that kind of stuff wrapped around, the actual product itself and the code and the algorithms and what have you, right? So I think it's interesting to be developing, algorithms and technical things in that sort of bigger context, rather than just in some sense doing those things for, measuring things or for publications or what have you, right? So yeah, it's a little bit broader in that sense, and I think it makes sort of sense for me personally because. Yeah, I'm a bit of a generalist, right? And I'm very interested in the product side and design and things like this, as well as the just the technical side. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you, James.
Yeah, I should say academia is great.
And I'll continue.
But, this is interesting in different sort of broader ways. Yeah.
No, exactly that. That's really interesting to hear. So it'd be quite interesting to hear from your perspective. So it'd be good to hear kind of what you bring from an outsider perspective to the role. So I know kind of this project is a fairly new aspect to Senseye, so it'd be good to hear kind of the aspects that you brought to the role working on the Gen AI project.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the things that I guess I've brought to that and my group have brought to that are probably similar to the things we've brought, to the technology we've developed to, at Senseye to date, right? And some of that is, I think, to do with being outsiders, right? And I think, the best way to look at it would be that maybe we bring the kind of things that physicists, can or tend to bring to projects, right? Which, ideally is sort of, first principles thinking, right? And then the ability to sort of take the disorder of the world, right? And come up with sort of organizing models, right? Like ways of understanding, just the complexity that's out there, right? And be that in terms of how to structure algorithms or how to structure the product, the concepts and things like that, right? So me and my group all come, without particular domain knowledge in this area, but we have these sort of similar backgrounds in a way that, maybe have some of the advantages that I was just talking about, okay? And then, the idea is always to try and sort of mesh that with the domain knowledge that other people have that we work with and from customers and so forth, right? Okay, so to sort of respect the domain, but bring sort of critical thinking and first principles thinking to it, right? Ideally, yeah.
No, that's great. So it's definitely kind of a collaboration from both forces, which is super interesting to hear about. So I know you've obviously touched on this briefly just then, but it'd be really great to hear a little bit more in depth on what role does the research team play in developing Senseye Predictive Maintenance as a whole. I know they're a prominent factor in the production of the app and the ongoing preservation of the platform as well. So it'd be really great to hear a little bit more about what the day-to-day is and what the definition of the role is.
Okay. So I guess we have sort of narrower and broader responsibilities. So in terms of narrow responsibilities, that would be developing particular algorithms or combinations of algorithms or pipelines or what have you for solving particular problems, right? So all the way from researching those things, understanding the problem, all the way up to code, which actually goes into production at the end of that. Okay, so in some sense that's our narrow responsibility, but more broadly than that, we're interested in kind of framing the overall problem which the application is trying to solve and the sort of way of modeling it and the way of thinking about it. Okay, and then the algorithms end up just being parts of that and ways to put that into practice. Okay, so I think the research group at Senseye really are quite product focused. Okay, and have a significant input into basically conceptual architecture of the product, right? Okay, and then that's sort of reflected in my own role. So I'm head of research, but I'm also part of the product leadership team. And the idea there is that, these things have to work very, very closely together, the algorithms and the UI, to get the sort of your optimum results and optimum performance, right? Well, the best product that we can. Yeah. If that makes sense.
Of course, yeah, no, again, that's it seems, everything you're doing is collaborative, and again, it's super interesting to hear about. So again, you've touched on obviously working with a wider team and the approach being extremely collaborative, but it'd be great to hear a little bit more about how do you and your team help turn AI and algorithms into a measurable business outcome for our customers? So, as you've mentioned, you're working super closely with teams, but to focus a little bit more on the topic we're talking about today, how are you kind of turning these algorithms into a measurable business outcome?
Yeah, it's sort of an interesting question, right? I mean, so we do measure top level things to do with overall customer satisfaction, customer satisfaction with individual things that the product is doing, and then more sort of general business outcomes like the amount of money customers are saving, return on investment and things like that. Okay, those are things, that we measure and we understand and we keep in mind, and we try to understand the drivers of those, right? But the reality though is that when the product is being developed and algorithms are being developed, this is happening fundamentally based on kind of instinct, right, and judgment, and knowledge of what's possible, and knowledge of the domain, right? There's thousands of decisions that get made, in producing the system that we're talking about today. Yeah, and this, as always, happens semi-informally, right? Okay, and we will produce this functionality. It goes into the product, and then we will monitor how it affects these KPIs over periods of time. Get informal customer feedback, right? And then we will iterate and improve things. Yeah. So, the overall measured goals are some sort of wrapper around what we do. And then inside that is, like I said, instinct and judgment and so forth. Yeah.
No, exactly. I think what you're saying is it's all there to support kind of what's existing already. It's not to take away. So that's super useful information. Thank you so much for providing. a deeper insight into that. So it kind of actually would be good to get your general opinion on is the term AI overused or misused in a B2B software environment? So as I mentioned, it can be a little bit touchy in terms of like manufacturing and certain industries like that. So it'd be good to get your thoughts on that.
Okay, I mean, I think that the main thing to say about that is that most things that have AI attached to it, attached to them, are not AI in very meaningful senses. Okay, so it tends to be, a term that's applied to machine learning systems, which, are best as some sort of component of an AI system. And this is sort of in the same way that in the past, the term machine learning has been applied to things which would previously have just been understood as statistical techniques or what have you, right? So you get some sort of inflation in the terms that people that people apply to things. Okay. The particular thing I guess we're talking about today, generative AI, I think deserves the AI term more than most things, okay? Just because there are elements there in systems based on that technology of a kind of general intelligence, right? So it's not narrow machine learning. It has the feel of something that is broader than that, okay? But yeah, generative AI systems are not, full, general, broad sort of AI that we imagine may come one day in future. Okay, so I guess the term is used in a marketing sense very freely. Not everything deserves it, but generative AI stuff, I think, deserves it more than most. Right?
No, exactly. Yeah, that's really great insight you've given into that. That it's not a term that should be feared almost. It should be allocated appropriately. So that's super interesting to hear. So I think a big concern of a lot of customers and prospective customers in this terms of updates would be privacy and security. So it'd be great to hear your thoughts on how does Senseye Predictive Maintenance ensure that the privacy and security of user data while integrating the AI application for conversational PDM. So how is that ensured, and what protection systems are in place?
Okay, so I think the main thing to understand here is it's not fundamentally different than anything else much else that a product like ours does. Okay, when you're creating generative AI output, fundamentally what you're doing is you're sending some data to a mathematical function, which is doing some operation on that data and producing some output. Okay, so to make sure this is a secure process, right? You have to make sure that when the data goes to that function that it's protected, okay? That when it's passed through whatever is hosting that function, that the data is not stored or it's not used for training in ways that you don't want. And then when you get the output, that is routed back to your systems again in a sort of a safe way, okay? So I think there is nothing here that's different from normal machine learning system in most ways, right? And there's nothing different in terms of protecting data that doesn't, apply to Senseye already. Okay, I think the only particular thing here is that often the models that people use are not under control of the direct control of the organization themselves. Okay, so the most powerful models are commercial models, right? Provided behind APIs. Okay.
Yeah.
So to use those things safely, you need to understand the organization which is providing that access and their terms and data retention and all of this kind of thing, right? And make sure that data is not used for training models and so forth. Okay. And at Senseye, the models we're using for this particular functionality are hosted by Microsoft on Azure. And yeah, they are certified compliant with Siemens stringent compliance requirements in terms of customer data. And yeah, I really think there is there is no issue here with the kind of things that we are doing or how we organize these things. Right?
Thank you so much, James, for providing that insight. That's a massive reassurance for customers and potential customers who are concerned over that, aspect of using the application. So looking onto data protection, could you elaborate on the measures in place to protect sensitive data when using language models and AI within the platform?
Yeah. Okay. So the important thing here is that you don't have essentially kind of cross-contamination between customer data, right? And a way in which that might happen in certain applications, as if data from one customer is used to train models that are used for other customers. And when they're text models, one can imagine those models remembering, effectively text from one customer and, producing that in an uncontrolled way for other customers and so forth. All of that kind of bad stuff, right? At Senseye, again, as I sort of touched on in the previous question, I don't think this is a concern, right? So it's not a concern for a number of reasons, right? So the models that we're using to provide this functionality are kind of vanilla models, right? So we're not training them on customer data at all, right? So there is no potential for, this sort of cross-contamination there, right? And then I think that the second thing to say is that these models that we're using for this particular functionality are commercial models. They're hosted in a compliant environment on Azure at Microsoft. And yeah, the data that sent as input to those models is not retained, and the output is not retained, and the data we send is not used for training. Okay, so in order to run this functionality in a safe way, to my mind, what matters is just standard privacy and security practices, right? Okay, and again, with our particular application, right? So we're part of Siemens. Siemens are, extremely conscious of these things and extremely serious about compliance, right? And yeah, through the development of this kind of functionality and its implementation, this is always is a paramount thing. Okay. But I think that the deep thing to say here is that, there really is nothing fundamentally different about generative AI technology in this sense than you would have for other kinds of, machine learning AI functionality, right?
Yeah. Oh, no, that's great. Thank you, James, for providing a lot more insight into the area of data protection. Again, that's a huge kind of aspect for potential clients. And I think, something that should be taken extremely seriously. So thank you for giving us more insight onto that. So moving on to kind of the topic we are talking about today, it'd be really great to hear about, when did Gen AI become a part of your thinking, and what has impressed you most about its use in both a business and personal environment?
Yeah, I mean, I think it came to our attention with a lot of force at the same time as it came to attention of very many people, which was, in the second half of 2022 with GPT-3 and later on ChatGPT, right? These are really very amazing things, even to people who are working in machine learning and AI. The quality of these models and the quality of output that they're able to produce, right? And I mean, for many of us, it was almost disturbing to see this, right? It's like a very severe jump up in power, right, of these models, and with very many obvious applications. So when you see and use these things for the first time, you understand that over time this will change the world in certain ways, even if you don't know exactly what those things are. It was very obvious at that time, right? And I guess the response of that at Senseye within the research group was to understand that, okay, and start to experiment as quickly as we could with the various different ways that this functionality could be used within our application, with the aim of finding things, aim of finding the low-hanging fruit, okay, so things that we could do relatively quickly that provided real value and real benefit to customers. Okay, so we experimented on very many things and built many prototypes, and what people will see in the application very soon, is the first part of that coming into production. Okay, and there will be many things that will follow on from that. Okay, so you had that route of experimenting, trying to understand the technology and understand how it can be used. right? And the second thing was looking at our broader systems and our algorithm pipelines and trying to put things in place that enable us to use those technologies. So, for example, I mean, language models are dealing in text, right? There's input and output, and the main data that we have to work with is time series, which is not text, okay? And so we, prioritized algorithms very quickly for describing time series, right? The things that we detected for actually looking at those shapes and describing them in language that a language model could understand, and also other machine learning systems for describing what was going on at particular points in time, okay, and being able to compare particular points in time and convey the output again in text that can go into language models. And then we also built, other support systems, right? So database type systems. One of the ways in which these models, can provide a lot of value is when you bring large amounts of information into their prompts, basically into their working memories, given the ability, for them to summarize or make decisions on. And we built efficient ways to bring together all of the information that we needed to have language models do those kind of things. And then finally, we built, a sort of compliant application hosting platform internally, which we use to give people within the company the ability to experience these things, okay? So, a lot of the functionality that language models could provide comes in the form of agents, right? Where there is some interactive element, and you can only really convey that to people and help people understand it. If they're able to actually interact with those systems in some sort of, realistic way. Okay, so it was that understanding the. In broad terms, that these things were very important, trying to find the specific value there that applied to our product, and then working quickly to build all of the support systems algorithmic and sort of technical, okay, that support us in delivering that functionality. Yeah.
Oh no, that's great. Thank you, James, for providing even further insight on that. So I know you've touched on the benefits of using this technology already, but is there anything you might have to add about what are the benefits in terms of using this technology for scalable predictive maintenance? So is there anything that is something to note about using this technology in the long term?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing to say about this is the way we've always imagined our product is as a decision support system, okay, in which you have a user which is working with some kind of machine intelligence to understand what is going on at any particular time, to help direct the user to what's important. And then you imagine the user working with the system in some kind of conversation, to understand what's happening and figure out a solution and so forth, right? Okay, so this is a thing that we sort of refer to or have referred to over time as conversational PDM. This decision support, conversational way of approaching this problem. And there are other ways to do it, but this has always been our thing, right? And this is the reason that one of the reasons that generative AI things fit so nicely into our product, okay? Because we can imagine that conversational PDM thing as a metaphor, right? But making that metaphor real has always been very, very difficult, okay? And it's been one of our main challenges to try and do that. But language models in particular, they just give you the opportunity to do that much, much more easily, okay? So there's a sense in which we've imagined this product, right? And how it works in its broad sense, and generative AI coming along, is actually helping us to, make that vision, I guess, real and more concrete, okay, in a way which was very difficult before this technology, okay. Big picture, it makes a lot of sense and it opens up a lot of opportunities for us. I mean, I'm happy to talk about more specific functionality that I can imagine in future if you want me to. Okay, but I think that is the main point, that it supports it supports like a real decision support system with a real kind of general intelligence inside it that can work with the user. Yeah.
No, that again is really interesting. It'd be great, as you mentioned then, if you could touch on the future of the functionality. So my next question was actually looking into what does the future look like for Generative AI and Senseye Predictive Maintenance. If you could touch on the future of the functionality and what it looks like for the product as a whole, I think that'd be a great way to wrap up the episode.
Yeah, okay. I would tend to think of it in this way, right, as something which is helping users on the sort of input, setup, configuration side of the system. And on the other end is helping people understand the output of the system and make the most use of that. And then in the middle, one can imagine pushing generative technologies into the core decision making of the application itself. Okay, so I can say a few things on those three different pieces, right? So on the input side, okay, you can imagine this technology supporting users essentially in setting up the application in a broad sense, right? So you have your data coming in, that data may need to be transformed in certain ways to get the most out of the product. Maybe you want to change a few analytic settings to optimize this or that, right? I think that whole process can be massively supported by an agent that really understands how to do that. So understands how the product works, how the analytics work, what's important in the data, understands about different machines, understands about all the different data transformations that users have set up in the past. And in this particular situation, can suggest to the user what they should do and work with the user in a sort of iterative way to implement those things. Okay, and we have prototype stuff of this nature. Okay, on the output side, this is what this initial product launch is sort of part of. Okay, so we're starting off by contextualizing the output. Right. So when you're told of a particular problem, to understand what problems this relates to in the past and what the, potential causes might be, and have that really nicely summarized and structured for you. Okay. So down the line, I think we imagine that evolving into a proper conversation. Okay. So this kind of information is the start of that conversation. And then the user can talk to the system, or talk to other expert people who are involved in the conversation to try and work out what's going on. And you have the agent there to support with access to all kinds of context and relevant information. Again, just to help the user understand what is going on, and then crucially to sort of learn from the user, right? So from those conversations to take that as kind of input information, right, to help it make better decisions in future and better contextualize things and so forth. Okay, so rather than giving people an alert, the alert is really just the start of a conversation. As conversations go around, you harvest that information and you pull it into future conversations. And this is a way fundamentally of transferring knowledge of what's happening or what matters from users' heads into the system, so that it can present it back to other users or the user, nicely, selectively, and helpfully. Okay, and you can imagine a huge amount of richness in that output. And of course we've prototyped, a lot more stuff than will be released in this initial thing, and it is very nice, right? Okay, and then the final thing is actually trying to bring generative AI into the inner decision-making logic, right? And so you can imagine doing that in sorts of interesting ways. I mean, one of them is that, you essentially have language model agents deciding when to raise alerts or not, supported by the results of normal machine learning or mechanical analytics, that these final decisions whether to take the user's time or not, those could be productively taken over by these sort of these AI agents. And then thinking aside from just language models, a lot of what we do underlying analytics is kind of forecasting based, right? you're interested in forecasting what's going to happen in future. And then you're looking for unusual things by forecasting the future and looking for things that you didn't forecast, right, which are therefore unusual and maybe of interest to the user. Okay, so we use machine learning and statistical models to do those things at the moment. But we are experimenting with time series transformer models, which I think have the potential to dramatically improve the quality of forecasting in products like ours. Okay. So just a couple of examples, right? But I think over time, language models will eat certain parts of the user interface, okay, sit alongside others and really provide a huge amount of utility for users. And then in terms of the analytics, I think there are many opportunities to have them working behind the scenes, okay, to optimize how we manage users' attention and take their time and, fundamentally how we decide what to do, right? Okay, but masses of potential. And I think this is really the case with generative AI in general, right? There's just a flood of potential things that one can do in all sectors and all different kinds of products. And I think it's going to take a few years for this to all play out, right? And for us to discover the things that, provide the most value and, etc. Right? It will take a while.
That's great. Thank you, James, again, for providing such an insightful kind of outlook into this topic. And I think it's, as you've said, it's all about the potential that is, available in the future. This kind of aspect of a product will only grow and only be there to assist. So thank you so much for joining us today and providing your expertise on this topic. So I think this wraps up our episode. So again, thank you for joining us, James. Thank you for listeners for tuning in, and we'll be back very soon with another episode of Trend Detection. Thank you and goodbye.
Please like and subscribe on all major podcast channels and find out more about Senseye Predictive Maintenance at Siemens.com.